The Legend of Jigong Chapter 32.
We have to start with a man named Liang Wankan.
Also known locally as Lying the Good.
Yeah, Lying the Good. He is over 60 years old, he is enormously wealthy, and he has recently made a really drastic, highly public change to how he manages his money.
A very controversial change.
Totally. He has placed a physical sign on his estate in Yunlan town that explicitly bans any donations to monks and Daoist priests.
Which, to a modern listener, that might just sound like putting up a no solicitor sign on your front door.
Right, like no junk mail.
Exactly. But we have to understand the historical and cultural weight of this action for the time. In this society, donating to religious institutions wasn't just a casual act of charity.
There's a whole system.
Yes, it was an ingrained socioeconomic contract.
Right.
Wealthy individuals funded the temples, and in exchange, they generated spiritual merit.
It was basically an economy of karma.
Perfect way to put it, an economy of karma. The clergy essentially held the keys to this merit-making process. So for a man nicknamed Liang the Good to publicly sever that contract, it's a massive societal disruption.
And if you're listening and wondering why he would do something so extreme, the text gives us the exact catalyst. And honestly, I kind of can't blame the guy.
No, it's entirely justified from his perspective.
Right. So prior to putting up this sign, Liang had made a massive institutional donation. He handed over 100 taels of silver to a Daoist priest, and this was specifically earmarked for the repair of a local temple.
Right.
And we should probably contextualize that amount, right? Because 100 taels isn't just like a generous tip in a collection plate.
Oh, not at all. The value of silver, it fluctuates depending on the exact historical era you look at. But generally speaking, one tael was roughly 40 grams of silver.
Okay.
So 100 taels is a small fortune. To put it in modern terms, this isn't dropping a $100 bill in a charity bucket outside a grocery store.
Right.
This is writing a check for hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a new community center or hospital wing.
Wow, so it's foundational.
Exactly. It's infrastructure level money. It could easily fund a working class family for a decade.
So he writes this massive check to build the community's spiritual infrastructure. And then, shortly after, Liang happens to be out and about in town, and he personally witnesses that exact same Daoist priest walking out of a local brothel.
Yeah, it's just a devastating betrayal of trust.
The priest had taken that monumental donation and completely squandered it on worldly vices.
It is the ultimate breach of that socioeconomic contract we just talked about. Liang realizes in that moment he isn't buying merit.
He's subsidizing corruption.
Exactly.
And here's the pivot that I just find so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because Liang doesn't become a misanthrope.
Right.
He doesn't just say, well, humanity's corrupt, I'm keeping all my money, forget everyone. He just cuts out the middleman.
He localizes the charity.
Yes. He sets up a porridge kitchen right at the gate of his own estate to feed the local poor of Yunlan town directly. He wants to verify the impact of his wealth.
Which makes perfect sense.
I think of modern charity scandals. Like, if you find out the CEO of a massive global nonprofit that you support is, embezzling millions to buy luxury real estate.
You cancel your recurring donation immediately.
Exactly. But you don't necessarily stop caring about poverty. You just start buying groceries for the food bank down the street.
You demand accountability.
Right. You demand accountability.
Yeah.
But that demand for accountability sends shockwaves through the local religious economy in this story.
Huge shockwaves.
Right.
Which brings us to the antagonist of our text. This is a Daoist priest named Zhang Miaoxing.
Right.
He resides at the Shengyin Temple on Wuxian Mountain, which is about 5 miles away from Liang's estate. And Zhang's temple is in dire straits.
It's falling apart.
Literally falling apart. The walls are crumbling. The main hall is collapsing. It genuinely needs that infrastructure money that Liang used to provide.
So Zhang looks at his crumbling temple, turns to his junior brother, this is a man named Lu Tong, and demands to know why they aren't out gathering funds.
And Lu just points out the obvious.
Yeah, he says, Liang the Good has cut us off. Liu actually acknowledges the brothel incident involving the other priest.
He's very pragmatic about it.
He is. He basically says, look, someone in our ranks ruined the system. Liang is feeding the poor directly now. The well is dry, and we just have to accept the consequences of that institutional failure.
Right. Li Miaotong represents a much more pragmatic, perhaps spiritually grounded acceptance of cause and effect.
Yeah.
But Zhang Miaoxing's reaction reveals the absolute dark underbelly of that merit-making economy.
It's so dark.
Because Zhang doesn't see the crumbling temple as a consequence of corrupt clergy losing the public's trust. His pride is just deeply wounded.
He tells his brother that if he can't get money out of Liang, he is essentially bowing down to a layman.
Which he refuses to do. So Zhang decides he will go to Liang's estate himself to, in his words, extort the funds. Or, as he also puts it, to teach Liang a lesson.
I really struggle with Zhang's logic here, though. Like, does he view this as a desperate, necessary act of survival because his temple is collapsing? Or is this purely an ego trip because a wealthy layman dared to close his wallet?
It's definitely the latter, but it's heavily veiled in entitlement.
Really?
Yeah, it goes back to that unspoken social contract. Zhang feels that the religious class intrinsically deserves the wealth of the laity.
Even if the clergy is messing up.
Exactly. He divorces his own identity from the corrupt priest at the brothel. He probably views that guy as a complete failure, but he still demands the privileges that were revoked because of that failure.
Oh, wow. So he feels owed.
Very much so. From Zhang's perspective, Liang's decision to bypass the clergy and feed the poor directly is an insult to the natural order of things.
And when someone feels that level of systemic entitlement, they can justify almost anything. Anything at all. So we have the motive. The funding has been cut, and Zhang wants to reestablish dominance over Liang's wealth.
Now we move into the actual mechanics of the attack.
Right, because Zhang doesn't go after Liang the Good directly.
No, that would never work.
He targets Liang's son, a young man named Xiwan.
Because a direct confrontation over theology or institutional funding would just fail. Liang has already made up his mind on that front, right?
Yeah, he put up a literal sign.
Exactly. So to penetrate the estate, Zhang has to find a vulnerability, like an unsecured back door, and he finds it in the son.
So Zhang travels to Yunlan town and spots Xiwan outside the estate. And what follows is just, it is an absolute masterclass in social engineering.
It's terrifyingly effective.
Zhang plays the role of a wandering mystic, someone who can read fortunes, and he just buries this young man in poetry and flattery.
The language in the text is incredibly specific here.
Yeah, Zhang calls Xiwan a scholar. He tells him he has the face of someone from a family of poetry and books. He calls him beautiful jade and stone.
And red cassia in flowers. And, the choice of those metaphors is deliberate and highly manipulative.
How so?
Well, when Zhang calls him beautiful jade and stone, he is telling Xiwan that he possesses an immense intrinsic value that is currently hidden or unpolished.
Wow.
It speaks directly to the psychology of unrecognized potential.
He is validating an internal narrative that Xiwan probably already holds about himself.
Exactly. He's telling him what he wants to hear.
Zhang then pivots to metaphors of restriction, which I find really interesting. He says Xiwan is like a bird in thorns or a fish in a puddle.
Yes.
He tells him, without the water of 3 rivers, how can a fish shed its scales and become a dragon?
It's such an intoxicating pitch.
I mean, I'd fall for it. You are destined to be a dragon, but you are stuck in a puddle, and I am the only one who sees your true scale.
It bypasses logic entirely. The flattery creates a temporary, intense emotional bond. Xiwan feels seen and understood by this mysterious stranger.
And once that bond is established, Zhang moves right to the extraction phase.
The pivot is seamless.
He tells Xiwan he can read his fortune and help him achieve this great destiny, but he requires a specific piece of information. Xiwan's bazi.
Right.
For those of us unfamiliar with the term, what exactly is the bazi, and why is it so dangerous to hand it over to a stranger?
So bazi translates to 8 characters. It refers to the 4 pillars of destiny in Chinese astrology.
Okay.
It is the exact year, month, day, and hour of a person's birth.
Yeah.
But it is much more than just a birth date. Each of those 4 pillars is represented by 2 characters, a heavenly stem and an earthly branch.
So that makes 8 characters total.
Exactly. And in this metaphysical framework, the moment you take your first breath, the specific cosmic alignment of those elements forms your spiritual architecture.
Your spiritual architecture.
Yes, it is your foundational data.
So it's not just, hey, I was born on a Tuesday in March.
No.
It's the absolute cryptographic key to your existence.
It is the ultimate metaphysical password.
Which is why I keep coming back to modern cybersecurity analogies with this tech.
It's a perfect fit.
Think about how a phishing scam works today. A hacker rarely tries to brute force their way through a complicated firewall, right?
Right, that's too hard.
Instead, they send an email that looks like it's from a prestigious organization, offering you an award or some exclusive opportunity. They flatter you. They make you feel special.
They lower your defenses.
Yeah, and all you have to do to claim your destiny is click a link and confirm your mother's maiden name or your social security number.
And because Xiwan is completely intoxicated by the idea of his own greatness, he just hands it over without a second thought.
He just gives it to him.
He gives Zhang his complete Basie.
And the moment he speaks those words, the illusion drops. Zhang mutters a spell, physically strikes Xiwan, and steals one of his 3 souls and 2 of his 7 spirits.
And Xiwan just collapses in the street.
He's down, just instantly comatose.
But before we move forward into the fallout of that, we should probably clarify what was actually stolen.
Right, because the text references a very specific Daoist concept of the self here.
Yes, the Hun and the Po. So, the 3 souls, the Hun, are ethereal. They are related to intellect, consciousness, and the spiritual mind.
So higher brain function, essentially.
Exactly. And the 7 spirits, the Po, are corporeal. They are tied to the physical body, base emotions, and physiological functions.
Okay, so by stealing 1 soul and 2 spirits.
Zhang is deliberately fracturing Xiwan's cognitive and physical vitality. He isn't killing him outright. He is crippling him on a multidimensional level.
He's putting him in this unexplainable coma. But what really strikes me is the ritual that Zhang performs once he gets back to his crumbling temple.
It is incredibly bureaucratic.
Right. He doesn't just, like, wave a wand and curse the boy from afar.
Yeah.
He takes dry grass, he binds it into a straw effigy, and then he uses cinnabar ink to write Xiwan's Bazi onto the doll.
And the cinnabar ink is historically significant here.
Oh, really?
Yes. It is a bright red mineral pigment heavily utilized in Daoist rituals, alchemy, and the writing of talismans.
Okay, so it's not just regular red ink.
No, it commands spiritual authority. By writing the exact cosmic coordinates of Xiwan's birth in cinnabar ink on this effigy, Zhang creates a perfect proxy.
A voodoo doll, basically.
Essentially, yes.
Then he pierces the heart of the straw doll with 7 brand new needles to execute these spells. The 5 ghosts and 7 arrows spells.
It's an incredibly structured, almost administrative form of violence.
It really is. But I want to push back on Xianon for just a moment.
Sure.
Because if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, look, this kid was from a wealthy, educated family. He was supposedly a scholar. How could he be so incredibly naive to just hand over his spiritual social security number to a guy in the street?
It does seem foolish.
Does his immense privilege actually make him an easier mark?
I think so, yes. Privilege often acts as an insulator against mundane threats, like starvation or physical violence.
Right.
But it can leave an individual woefully unprepared for targeted psychological manipulation.
Because he's never had to face it.
Exactly. Think about it. Xiwan has likely spent his entire life surrounded by people who defer to his father's wealth. He probably feels an immense, suffocating pressure to live up to the Liang the Good legacy.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. So when Zhang comes along and validates Xiwan's individual merit, completely separate from his father's money, it hits a massive vulnerability.
Intelligence and education are cognitive defenses. But flattery targets the ego and completely bypasses those defenses.
It's the vanity trap.
The vanity trap. And Zhang is fully aware of the devastation he is causing. Like when his junior brother Lu Miaotong sees this straw doll with needles sticking out of its heart, he is horrified.
Truly.
He demands to know who Zhang is trying to harm. And Zhang's response is honestly one of the most chilling lines in the text.
It really is.
He said, "Don't speak nonsense. This isn't harming someone. I am going to teach Liang a lesson."
And that right there is the defining characteristic of ideological malice.
How do you mean?
Zhang completely sanitizes the violence. He reframes a lethal attack on an innocent young man as a necessary structural correction.
Wow.
In Zhang's mind, Liang broke the rules by stopping the donations, so Liang is responsible for the consequences.
So he doesn't see himself as the bad guy at all?
Not at all. Zhang has cast himself not as a criminal, but as an educator delivering a harsh but deserved syllabus.
That is deeply sociopathic.
Completely.
And the lesson he is teaching is about to shatter the Liang family.
Yes, it is.
Because with the son incapacitated, the trap is fully set. We now shift our focus back to the father, Liang Wankan. And this brings us to a part of the text that I just found profoundly moving.
Me too.
Because it shifts away from the mechanics of the magic and dives deep into the psychology of absolute despair.
Liang's situation is the epitome of helplessness.
Yeah. He is over 60, and Xiwan is his only son. He possesses vast resources, so he naturally deploys them.
Right. He calls in the best doctors in the region.
But they are completely baffled. They examine Xiwan and conclude that it is a loss of soul and spirit, and that medical science is entirely useless here.
Which means the one thing Liang has an abundance of, his money, is entirely impotent.
It can't save his son.
He cannot buy a cure. He cannot buy back his son's vitality.
And it is in this state of profound impotence that the narrative places Liang at the door of his estate, looking out over the very porridge kitchen he established to bypass the corrupt clergy.
The setting there is crucial.
Right. He is standing at the physical manifestation of his own goodness. And as he watches the poor gather for food, a woman named Madame Zhao approaches.
And the visual contrast the text paints here is just staggering.
It really is. Madame Zhao is destitute. The text specifies exactly what she brings with her to the soup kitchen. She has 3 older boys running ahead of her, maybe 11 or 12 years old.
Okay.
She has 2 younger boys running behind her, 7 or 8 years old. She has a toddler strapped to her back, and she is holding an infant in her arms.
7 children in total.
7 kids. And Liang calls her over. She explains that her husband is a traveling merchant who has essentially vanished.
They are living through a famine year.
Yeah, she has a massive family to feed, and they have absolutely nothing. She is literally there begging for just enough porridge to keep her children breathing.
And Liang, staying true to his nature, doesn't just hand her a bowl of porridge.
No, he orders his servants to bring out 10 strings of cash and gives it to her directly.
Which is a massive infusion of help.
Huge. She leaves weeping with gratitude. But it isn't her joy that the text focuses on here. It is the devastating internal monologue that Liang has after she walks away.
He watches this woman who has nothing but the clothes on her back walk away surrounded by 7 healthy living children.
Yeah.
And he looks at his own life. He holds unimaginable wealth. He has a sprawling estate, massive reserves of silver, and a reputation for unparalleled generosity.
But he only has 1 child.
Yet he has only 1 child, and that child is lying in a bed, mysteriously dying.
He realizes that Madame Zhao is materially bankrupt, but biologically wealthy.
Yes.
And he is materially wealthy, but biologically bankrupt. And the friction between those 2 realities completely shatters Liang's worldview.
He has a sudden, crushing epiphany about the nature of fate.
He decides that his wealth and his morality have absolutely no bearing on the universe.
It is the death of the just world fallacy for him.
Oh, that's exactly what it is.
Right. Liang has operated under the assumption that if you act righteously, if you feed the poor, if you refuse to fund corruption, the universe will protect you.
Karma, basic.
Exactly. But seeing Madame Zhao proves to him that suffering and blessing are distributed arbitrarily.
So he concludes that praying to the gods and Buddhas is entirely pointless.
He accepts that it is simply his tragic fate to be left childless in his old age.
Imagine the psychological weight of that moment. You know, you have done everything right. You played by the rules, you built your community, you held the powerful accountable.
And the universe responds by striking down the one thing you love most.
It's a complete breakdown of the cosmic transaction. But here's the tension I really want to explore with you.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because we, the listener, know something Liang doesn't. We know this is an arbitrary fate. We know this is a highly targeted attack by a disgruntled priest.
Right.
So is it possible that Liang's philanthropy, his desire to do good, was actually the catalyst for his own destruction? Like, if he had just been a selfish, greedy, rich man hoarding his silver, Zhang wouldn't have expected a donation in the first place, and the son would be safe.
That is a fascinating point.
Did his goodness make him a target?
That is a dark but structurally accurate observation. I mean, to be a philanthropist is to be highly visible.
Yeah, you stick out.
By actively managing his wealth and enforcing a moral standard on his donations, Liang positioned himself as a node of power in the community.
Okay.
When you hold and exercise power, even for righteous reasons, you attract the attention of those who feel entitled to it.
Right. System notices you.
Liang's decision to close the checkbook to the clergy was a declaration of independence. And in systems that rely on dependence, independence is treated as an act of war.
So his attempt to act morally was interpreted as an act of aggression by a corrupt system.
Exactly.
It's brutal. And right at this absolute nadir, right when Liang has given up on the gods, surrendered his hope, and accepted his tragic fate, the architect of this entire nightmare returns to the stage.
And this begins the transition into the elaborate theater of the cure.
Because Zhang Yaxing returns to the Liang estate, But he does not arrive as the poetic, wandering fortune teller who flattered Xi Yuan.
No, he has completely altered his persona to fit the next phase of the con.
He shows up looking terrifying and authoritative. The text says his face looks like iron, he has a fierce beard, he's wearing a specific blue coat, and he's carrying a sword on his back.
Very dramatic.
Very. And he doesn't knock and ask for money, he stands outside the estate and immediately starts shouting these grand, terrifying proclamations.
He diagnoses the entire property as being overwhelmed by an evil aura.
He calls it the Five Ghosts Felian aura.
Yes.
And he specifically states that it harms the young of the household.
Notice the psychological precision of this tactic, though.
What do you mean?
He doesn't say, hey, I hear your son is sick.
Right.
He uses esoteric, technical jargon to diagnose a systemic environmental threat.
Ah, okay.
The Five Ghosts refers directly back to the spell he cast on the straw doll.
Oh.
While Thalian is often associated with the Chinese god of wind, sometimes depicted as a destructive, demonic force bringing pestilence.
So he's layering it with mythology.
Exactly. By throwing out these highly specific, terrifying mystical terms, he establishes absolute, unquestionable authority.
And it works perfectly. Liang, who had just resigned himself to a godless, arbitrary universe, hears this man loudly diagnosing the exact, unexplainable tragedy occurring inside his house.
The resignation vanishes.
And the desperation returns tenfold. Liang invites this terrifying stranger inside, treats him with the utmost respect, and literally begs for a solution.
And this is where the sheer audacity of Zhang's scam is fully revealed.
Yes, because the requirements for the cure are just mind-boggling.
The specificity of the demands is the core mechanism of the extortion here.
Zhang tells Liang that to cure the boy, they must construct a massive platform inside the main gate of the estate. But he dictates the exact dimensions.
It must be exactly 3 Zhang and 2 Qi high.
Which is roughly 32 feet tall. He wants a 3-story wooden platform built immediately inside the front gate.
It doesn't stop there.
I know.
On top of this massive structure, there must be an 8 immortal table, which is a specific type of traditional square wooden table, and a grand chair.
Right.
He demands a particular type of long-life incense, yellow paper, a specialized inkstone, a writing brush, cinnabar ink, a tray of 5 distinct grains, and rootless water.
Okay, I want to pause on the rootless water, because you explained this to me before we started recording, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a brilliant detail.
Rootless water is rainwater that is caught in a vessel before it ever touches the ground, right?
Correct. In traditional alchemy and medicine, rootless water is considered pure, untainted by the earthly realm.
But logistically, demanding rootless water is basically a stalling tactic.
It is a brilliant stalling tactic. You cannot just go to a well to get it. You have to wait for the sky to cooperate.
You literally have to wait for it to rain.
It forces the victim into a state of hypervigilant compliance.
And as if that wasn't enough, Zhang demands 5 colors of silk to be draped across the front of this 32-foot platform. Green, yellow, red, white, and black.
Right, and each color meticulously corresponds to the 5 elements of Chinese cosmology: wood, earth, fire, metal, and water.
So it all sounds incredibly official.
Every single item on this exhaustive list is deeply embedded in the cultural and mystical framework of the era. It all sounds perfectly legitimate.
Right, it creates this overwhelming aesthetic of legitimacy. Oh, and right at the end, almost as an afterthought to the rootless water and the massive lumber project, Zhang adds the final requirement.
500 taels of silver.
500 taels of silver.
The true objective, finally unearthed. But notice how brilliantly it is camouflaged.
How so?
Well, if Zhang had walked up to the gate and simply said, "Give me 500 taels and your son will wake up," it would be an obvious ransom demand.
Liang would likely have his guards seize the man.
Exactly. But by burying the financial extortion at the bottom of an impossibly complex list of arcane, elemental requirements, Zhang changes the nature of the transaction.
It doesn't feel like a bribe anymore.
The silver no longer feels like a payment to a man. It feels like a necessary component of a mystical equation.
I used to compare this to a shady car mechanic, but honestly, that doesn't capture the power dynamic here.
No, it's much more sophisticated than that.
This is more like hiring a specialized elite crisis management firm or a high-powered legal defense team. You bring them a terrifying problem, and they tell you that to fix it, you need to navigate a labyrinth of obscure regulations, file esoteric motions in 3 different jurisdictions, hire boutique subcontractors, and by the way, the retainer is $5 million. You are so alienated and terrified by the complexity of the process that writing the massive check actually feels like the only tangible way you can exert control.
You are outsourcing your anxiety to their supposed expertise.
Exactly. But they are the ones who secretly lobby to create the regulatory maze in the first place.
That is exactly the dynamic. The extreme specificity, the exact measurements, the elemental colors, creates cognitive overload.
Liang's brain is just fried.
Right. Liang is so busy figuring out how to build a 3-story platform and catch rainwater before it hits the ground that he doesn't have the mental bandwidth to question the 500 tails.
Let alone question the man making the demands.
Which brings up the most frustrating question for any outside observer.
Why doesn't Liang recognize Zhang?
Exactly.
They're standing in the same room. Liang is apologizing to him for not offering him tea fast enough. I know Zhang changed his clothes and has a beard now, but this is the guy who cornered his son in the street. Is Liang just completely oblivious?
We have to factor in the concept of grief blindness here.
Okay, grief blindness.
Liang is a man drowning in an ocean of despair. When you are drowning and someone throws you a life preserver, you don't ask to see their Coast Guard certification.
All right.
You don't study their face, you just grab the ring. Zhang is offering the one thing Liang desires more than anything else in the world: hope.
And that hope blinds him.
That overwhelming hope creates a psychological blind spot massive enough to hide a con artist standing in plain sight.
So Liang completely submits. He orders his entire household to stop what they are doing. The servants are dispatched to gather the silks, catch the water, find the grains, and begin building a 32-foot wooden tower inside the courtyard.
The trap is fully sprung. Precisely at this moment of total systemic control that an agent of absolute disruption arrives.
Someone who refuses to acknowledge the authority of the platform, or the terror of the aura, or the rules of the house.
Enter the disruptor.
Enter the mad monk, Jigong.
The narrative pivot here is brilliant. We move from a space of meticulous, oppressive control to a space of liberating chaos.
So Jigong is traveling with 3 companions, Gao Guotai, Sulu, and Feng Shun, on their way to the capital. They just happen to pass by Yinlin town.
And immediately, the text establishes that Jigong operates on a completely different wavelength.
He doesn't need to ask for a Basie.
He doesn't need to consult a chart. He simply looks through the gate at the Liang estate, sees this massive, highly regulated 32-foot platform, and instantly senses the demonic aura.
He sees right through the theatrical cure and recognizes the extortion.
But he doesn't burst through the gates and announce himself as a divine savior.
No, he initiates a stress test on the environment.
Right.
He walks up to the door, presenting himself as a ragged, starving monk, and begs for a meal.
And the servants, who have been hauling lumber and silk all day for the fake Daoist, point to the sign.
The very sign that started this entire conflict. No donations to monks or Daoists.
They tell him the porridge kitchen is closed, and he needs to leave.
Which sets up a moment of profound, quiet grace.
It really does.
Among all the stressed and angry servants, there is an older man who, the text notes, is inherently kind and loves doing good deeds.
This servant has been feeling ill all morning. He hasn't been able to eat his own meal.
Which is just a simple, untouched bowl of pristine white rice.
Seeing this pathetic-looking monk, the older servant brings out his own bowl and offers it to Jigong.
It is the purest act of charity in the entire story. It isn't a massive institutional donation of silver. It isn't a highly publicized porridge kitchen.
It's just a sick old man giving away his only meal to a stranger.
And what does Jigong, the hero of our story, do in response to this beautiful gesture?
He drops it on the stone ground, smashing it to pieces.
It is an incredibly jarring escalation.
Completely unexpected.
It's infuriating. The servant is stunned. He says, "What are you doing? I gave you my only food out of the goodness of my heart."
And Jigong just laughs in his face.
He says, "You expect me to eat cold leftovers." And then, standing over the shattered bowl, Jigong begins making the most outrageous demands.
He demands an absolute feast.
He wants fresh fruits, hot meats, cold meats, a private table, and he insists that the master of the house must personally come out and accompany him while he eats.
The servants react exactly how you would expect.
They are furious.
They think he is a raving lunatic. They tell him he would have to be reincarnated before the master of an estate like this would sit down with a beggar like him.
Now, I have to push back here, because I know Jigong is the hero, but from the perspective of that servant, This monk is just a malicious jerk.
It looks terrible, yes.
I struggle to see how traumatizing a kind old man and destroying his only food is justified. Does the end always justify the means in this philosophical framework?
It is a difficult scene to digest if we only look at it through the lens of interpersonal politeness.
Right.
But we have to look at what Jigong is actually attacking. The house is operating under a strict, corrupted paradigm.
The rule of law. The sign on the gate forbids helping monk.
Exactly. The kind servant, though incredibly well-intentioned, was offering a quiet, personal rebellion in the shadows. He was trying to bypass the broken system without challenging it.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound.
Perfect analogy. And Jigong knows that a quiet bowl of rice won't save Xiwan, and it won't expose Zhang Yaxing.
They need a confrontation.
He needs a massive, public, undeniable confrontation. He needs to force the system to break.
So by smashing the rice and making offensive demands, he is deliberately shattering the script.
Zhang's entire scam relies on Liang being isolated, overwhelmed by detail, and blindly obedient to a false authority.
So Jigong introduces a spectacle so loud, so abrasive, and so confusing that it penetrates Liang's grief-induced isolation.
He is creating an anomaly that the fake Daoist cannot control.
It is the ultimate disruption technique. I think about it like this. Imagine a corrupt safety inspector has rigged a construction site with minor, invisible flaws just so he can swoop in, declare an emergency, and charge a massive fee to fix it. And the foreman is standing there, terrified, blindly following the inspector's complicated blueprint for the repairs.
Right, he's totally under control.
Then a rogue engineer shows up. He doesn't look at the blueprint. He doesn't file a report. He just grabs a sledgehammer and starts physically smashing the scaffolding to prove that the entire foundation is a lie.
He's breaking things to save lives.
He is destroying the illusion of order.
That captures the essence of crazy wisdom, which is a concept prevalent in Chan Buddhism and Taoism.
Crazy wisdom.
Yes. Jigong embodies it completely. The performative madness is a tool used to jolt people out of their deeply ingrained cognitive traps.
Because politeness would only reinforce the existing corrupted social order.
Exactly. Politeness is part of the trap.
And because his demands are being ignored, Jigong escalates from disruptive behavior to disruptive magic.
But his magic is the total opposite of Zhang's.
Remember, Zhang needed a bazi, cinnabar ink, needles, straw, and massive wooden platforms.
Highly structured.
Right. Jigong simply reaches up to his own mouth, physically grabs the spoken word alms, literally taking the sound itself, and throws it over the wall into the courtyard of the house.
This is the thematic climax of the story. We are presented with two entirely different modalities of power.
Yes, because Zhang is the villain, but he uses all the trappings of order and civility.
Right.
He dresses immaculately, he uses polite flattery to get the bathio, he creates highly organized lists of elemental materials, and he relies on the victim's obedience to authority.
He uses order to execute pure malice.
And Jigong is the total inversion of that paradigm.
He looks like a beggar, he acts incredibly rude, he breaks things, he offends people, and he makes irrational demands.
He uses the trappings of chaos and incivility to execute pure salvation.
The text is challenging our reliance on aesthetics.
It really is.
We assume that because something is well-organized, expensive, and delivered by someone in a uniform, it must be legitimate.
And we assume that because something is messy, abrasive, and disruptive, it must be harmful.
But the shock to the system works. The magical word, alms, echoes through the entire estate.
And it draws out the master. The text suddenly shifts to a vivid physical description of Liang Wangkang here.
He emerges from the estate, and he is described as being 8 feet tall, wearing a majestic blue satin cloak.
He looks every bit the powerful, wealthy patriarch.
He steps out into the chaos, fully expecting to punish a disruptive beggar.
But the moment Liang's eyes meet Jigong's, something incredible happens. The chaotic energy cuts right through the grief blindness.
Yes, it snaps him out of it.
Liang looks at this rude, destructive mad monk, and in an incredible cliffhanger moment, he has a sudden, intuitive realization.
He knows, without any logical proof, that this is the man who can cure his son.
The facade of the 32-foot platform and the fake Daoist is instantly threatened by a guy who just smashed a bowl of rice in the dirt.
And that profound moment of recognition, where true salvation is finally seen despite its abrasive packaging, is where our excerpt concludes.
We are left right on the precipice of the inevitable confrontation between performative expertise and genuine intervention.
What a place to stop.